Thank you, everybody. We're going to reconvene into open session. This is an open session of the special board meeting. We have a couple of different meetings this evening. We have a couple of staffing action items to do, and then we will convene into our actual working session. All right. So, Samantha, will you read the motion for employment of staff?
I move that the employment of staff as presented be approved.
The second?
Second.
Discussion? Kinsey?
Online voting is now open. Andrew, do you want a voice vote? Mary Lou, do you want a voice vote?
Aye.
All votes have been entered and the motion is carried with all board members voting in favor.
Okay, I'm going to pause this for a second. Andrew and Mary, just. You good? I think they're good. Okay. Samantha, please read the motion for resignation of staff.
I move that the resignation of staff as presented be approved.
Second.
Got a second from Laura. Any discussion? Kinsey?
Online voting is now open. All votes have been entered and the motion is carried. The results of the individual board member votes are as follows. Becker, yes. McCoy, yes. Lyerly, yes. Minnow abstained. Cannell, yes. Meister, yes. Yang, yes.
Thank you. Samantha, will you please read retirement of staff?
I move that the retirement of staff as presented be approved.
Second.
Discussion? Kinsey?
Online voting is now open. All votes have been entered and the motion is carried with all board members voting in favor.
Thank you, everybody. That is the end of the agenda for the special board meeting. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned. Okay, we're going to transition directly into our work session. Kinsey, please call roll. All right.
Yang?
Here.
Meister?
Here.
Cannell?
Here.
Minnow?
Here.
Lyerly?
Here.
McCoy?
Here.
Becker?
Here.
All right, all board members are present and accounted for. We're also joined this evening at the table by two members of our Intercity Student Council. Would you please introduce yourself?
I'm Lily Rotter from Green Bay East, and I'm a vice president.
I'm Betsy Hardy from Southwest High School.
Thank you. And as always, feel free to join us in the discussion. All right. We also have Superintendent Vicki Beyer for one of her last meetings. I don't think it's the last. Not yet, but we're getting very, very close. I'll put a pitch in for the event later. So, okay, so we'll move on to public forum. If you haven't already registered, there's a pink form. If you want to have an opportunity to speak, as you speak, you have 5 minutes. When you come to the lectern, if you are not a minor, if you're under 18 years old, you do not need to give your address. But if you are older than 18, please state your name and your address, and then we'll start the 5 minutes, right? So I have Dax Becker.
Good evening, members of the school board. My name is Dax Becker. I live at 3509 Barina Creek Drive here in Green Bay, and I just finished my freshman year at Preble High School. This past year, I was fortunate to represent Preble as a 3-sport student athlete on the soccer, basketball, and golf teams. I'm standing before you tonight to talk about Coach Rosinski. As the son of a coach, I'm the son of a coach and both my parents are teachers. Because of how I was raised, I have always been taught to stand up for what is right. That is why I'm here today, to respectfully but firmly ask that you retain Coach Rosinski as our head basketball coach. Coach Rosinski has had a profound impact on my development both on and off the court. He treats everyone with fairness and builds a strong, inclusive culture where the returning players feel valued. Removing him right now would be deeply disruptive to our team's unity and our development as students. One of the absolute best things about Preble High School is our teachers. When you get a problem wrong or when you don't understand the concept, Preble teachers don't give up on you. They work with you. They reteach you so that you can get better and succeed. I do not know what the district thinks Coach Rosinski did wrong, but I do know what makes Preble great. It is that philosophy of helping people learn from their mistakes. Coach Rosinski does exactly that for his players. Great coaches who actually want to be here are incredibly hard to come by. So why would the district want to throw that away? If Preble teachers know how to help students get better, my question to the administration and the school board is simple. Why are you not doing what you can to coach, teach, and help others who might have made a mistake? I ask this district and this board to live up to the standard of our own classroom teachers. Be like the people who make Preble so special. Give Coach Rosinski that same support and keep him on our sidelines. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dex. Next, and I apologize, I don't know if I can read your last name correctly. Eddie, is it Boyce? Okay, yeah.
Hello, I have multiple addresses. I don't know which one to give you, but I'll give you the one from downtown Green Bay. My name is Eddie Boyce, 416 Crooks, Green Bay, Wisconsin. I'm here to speak on behalf of Coach Rosinski. I am a former East grad, and I played for Rosinski. I don't know, closing in. He doesn't want to say it, but I'm the best player that he ever coached, anyways. But much like what this young man's saying, um, I had a lot of battles. From him being the head coach there for 20 years, he coached my older brother. He coached myself as well as my younger brother. So he had 3 generations of us playing and going to school at East High School. And when the news that kind of broke, I didn't really know, you know, a lot of the things that were going on. But I will tell you that, for me, I look at it and I know what kind of a man he is. I look at even when I got done playing collegiate and I came back, um, he would invite me over to come swim with all 4 of my children. So it wasn't just, well, you're just my player and what can I get out of you? There was also still that coach that was still there, but also wanting to know, and I'll still get texts from him, at least once a week, how is this? Or I hear you got another business endeavor. But, just that positive reinforcement. And I mean, I look at it. Um, there was a lot of times, and I'll give you a scenario. We were in a game, and it was a tight game, and some harsh words were exchanged in the heat of battle at halftime between me and him. And he did not care for it. And one of the assistant coaches was like, maybe, you should go back and apologize. And me being me, no, absolutely not. And so my mother would usually work, 3rd shift. So that day she didn't work, so she came to one of the games, and I went down and I went to go sit at the end of the bench after coming out from halftime, and she walks up to Coach Rosinski and she says, "Is he hurt? Like, what is he?" And he told her what I said, and I'm telling you, it was like fire. She didn't say one thing to him. She walked down to the opposite where I was at and just had her finger in my face and was like, "Don't you ever talk to him that way." But in the heat of the battle, I understood it, but also there was a lot of accountability that I was given. You know what I mean? My mother, that's your coach. You listen, and there was times where me playing in college as well. Um, Coaches were tough, but they always meant well, and he definitely has a huge heart and loves all the players. And even the young guys that I see now, some of them work for me in different fashions. They all love him. You know what I mean? Myself included. So I stand here before you, just like as this young man's stating, um, you got more than a coach in him. You do. And I think that is super rare, even from, when I talk to my college coach who just retired and he still should be coaching. He's like, it's not that anymore. And I think it's a luxury when you have that in this district where you have somebody that is more than a coach, that is also looking after players even when they're done playing and checking in. That goes further than just like, well, we should get rid of them. That's not the scenario here. And it shouldn't be. All you individuals that are sitting here, I'm telling you, and I don't really come out a lot to come do a lot of speak, but for this, um, the amount of respect that myself, as well as my mother, my brothers, and even former players have for him, it is unmatched. So I would, for me, I would say, on my behalf, you guys need to retain him truly, because you're getting more than just a coach. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, next, so just to make sure, Dax, you also filled out a pink form and we went off of the one from the internet. So I'm going to go on to Jim Hayes.
Thank you. Jim Hayes. I live 4437 Heritage Heights in De Pere. I spoke at the last couple of meetings again on Rick's behalf. Been as an assistant coach 23 years. Rick won 217 games for the school district. But that's not the important part of what he's done. As Eddie said, Eddie played for us for 3 years under some tough circumstances. But Rick has always given his complete self to these players. And I just want to say it would be a terrible, terrible misdeed to not reinstate him as a head coach. Kids love him, parents love him, and I can say for a fact that there's of the people in our basketball program at Preble, about 99% of the people are in his corner, and I'm speaking for them and just asking you guys if you could please reinstate him as head coach. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. The last sheet I have is Rick Brzezinski.
Rick Rosinski, 37. 21, half crown run. You hear things like that, and it's hard, because all these kids are special to me. So I'm gonna try to get through this the best I can. I'm not here to speak on my behalf. I'm here because of the kids and the parents that I have that have supported me through this whole ordeal. I haven't advocated for myself, and so I think it's time that I show a face with a name, because some of you don't know me, some of you do. So what you need to know is, through this whole ordeal, I've never once criticized, commented, or said anything about this whole situation. I just was letting it play out. All right, but I think it's appropriate that you hear what I have to say. I'm not going to talk about winning games, championships, credentials. I'm here to talk about the connections and the impacts that I've made, and I think you've heard a couple of these, and I'm sorry if I'm struggling to get through this. I don't brag. I'm humble. And I think that's what you need to understand. I've been coaching basketball since 1990. I was an assistant coach and I started 18, 19 years old at East for a guy named Todd Dickinson and head coach Steve Kessley, who is now the FRCC conference commissioner for us. 38 years of coaching in this district, 24 as a head coach at East and Preble. You know, I've served this district with utmost character, integrity, and morals. Never cheated, broken the rules, did anything unethical because I don't believe in. I've used basketball as a way to connect with kids. The relationships that are built are lifelong. Eddie is an excellent example of that. I've had over 40 players that I've been able to help to get to college. Some of them probably never would have had the opportunity if I wouldn't have kind of went out of my way to do the things I had to do for them. I had 45 all-conference players, 2 guys that played professionally, including Eddie's brother. Eddie will tell you he thought he should have played professionally, but maybe that's a different story. I'd do anything to help any kid at any time, and that's the biggest thing. And just a couple examples of that. I've arranged to get surgery done for them. Coach Hayes has helped me. Been to court for kids. I've actually dropped someone off at jail to serve jail time. I've helped get kids to eye doctor. I've been in the police station with former police chief Jim Arts to work with kids in trouble. Jim Arts, you all know, is probably one of the most respected guys in the city. I sat in the hospital till 2:30 with kids that were in a car accident. I've donated my check to make sure that families had rent. And he can attest to that. I've given money to players to go back to school. I've given money to kids to get dinner. You know, I've written letters to kids that were in trouble in jail. I've helped kids get jobs, stay eligible. You know, I've helped kids even move. An example is JD DeVault, the coach at East now. He played for me his senior year. He lived on his own. He had to move. He asked me to help him. I had to help him move. Who else is going to do it? You know, it's things you do. I've served on committees here. Rider committee, the code committee, all that was non-paid in the hours we put in. The relationships I have with the media, I mean, they're all positive. School board members that I had, former principal Ed Dorff, one of them. So those are things that you just do, not as a coach. You do it because it's the right thing to do. I started Silent Night, which is probably the greatest accomplishment I think that I've had. I raised almost $80,000 with the idea. And it was my idea. And then I got the help from others to help homeless kids in this district. I don't know if I'll ever know who was helped. Don't care, because those people got help with that money. I've recognized veterans. I've done special nights to represent and honor people that have worked in this district. Leon Butch Jakes, honored him. Former principal, referee, all the time he put in. Roger Azacker, currently still helping out at Edison. Jerry Williams, who just passed away. All these guys have over 200 years of helping kids in this district. I honored them because they deserve it. And that's what this position is about. But the biggest thing, I think, is when your kids reflect you. And I'm going to just tell you a quick story. And I don't care if I'm running out of time because I'm going to keep going. We played De Pere 10 years ago. They were rated 1 in the state. Last game of the season at De Pere, Thursday night. They had a special needs manager, Down syndrome, and his goal was to suit up for a game. So I'll keep this story short. Late in the game with about 3 minutes to play, we were down 20, ball goes out of bounds. Timeout's called. Talking to my kids in the huddle. All of a sudden I hear this big roar. And I just glance over to the score table and I see Nate, special needs manager, checking into the game. I said to my players, whatever you do, don't block his shot, don't foul him, don't try to steal it. My kids were so gracious, compassionate, and caring. They made that experience one of the most memorable experiences for that kid that he's ever going to have in his life. In the locker room after the game, we got beat by 20 points. My kids didn't care because they realized what they had done. And you got to remember, my kids, probably single parent families, low economic situations, all right, struggle in school, maybe behaviorally, academically, but these are the things they did. The next day, I received probably 20, 25 messages, emails. I'm going to read one of them to you. Dear Coach Rosinski, we'd like to extend to you, your staff, and the Red Devil players a heartfelt thank you for your role you played in Thursday night's game against Appear, in which our son Nate fulfilled a dream. He had to be one of the guys in playing a high school basketball game. Your sportsmanship, kindness, compassion, and class of your team showed by your response to Nate's opportunity was priceless, incredible, inspiring. Please know that all the attention that Nate received has not been expected and truthfully quite overwhelming for us. But we know it would never happen last night, Thursday's game, without you. Words cannot express how much we appreciate the way in which your players embraced the moment. Sincere appreciation they showed Nate. You and the Green Bay East team will always be a big part of wonderful memories we will have with Nate's big game. Coach Rosinski, you, your staff, and players are the best. We hope and pray that much success, happiness comes to you all. Please share the sincere thank you with everyone who is a part of Nate's special night. Sincerely, Beth and Mike Wagner, his parents. So when you see that, you know if you've made a connection. It's done without recognition. I currently have 6 former players who are currently head coaches. 3 of them, former players and assistants, are now the head coaches in Green Bay. JD Vault at East, Malcolm Moore at West, Mario Charles at Southwest. I must be doing something right if they got hired. So if they're good enough to coach, I don't know how I'm not. In all my years of coaching, no major infractions, discipline issues, my record speaks for itself. We put in a lot of hours doing this, 17 hours a week on top of coaching or teaching, from emails to texts to BADLs to city classics to youth stuff, player evaluations, coaches nights, youth tournaments. Sometimes it's 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. Nobody sees that. We've done more for Preble basketball than anyone has. And I think there's some parents here that can attest to that. Brought Summer League to Preble, more leagues, more tournaments. We brought skilled instructors in. We connected with AAU. We have a city classic for youth kids. We have a silent night. We have golf outing. We have 5th quarters. We have evaluations for youth. We have coaches clinics. No other school does that. No one. Nobody in this district, no other coach puts that time in, and I can attest to that. So what we do, we're doing the right thing. Now, for the last year, I had to deal with one parent continuously harassing me with text messages and emails, undermining everything we've done. Simple bully. If we lost, he was negative. If we won, he was negative. Yells at the players from the stands. He yells at the coaches from the stands. For what reason? Just because he doesn't like me. Multiple messages are just unimaginable. They read as novels. They're sent to everyone that you can think of for his own personal gratification and make me look bad. Everything from calling my booster club corrupt to wanting coaches removed after 4 days. What gives a person that's so-called a supporter the right to do this? The right to attack another individual for his own personal gain. The bigger question is, what makes him the expert? He does this in other sports, which nobody knows of. He's done it at AAU. He's currently doing it right now in the youth football. I have over 110 people that have signed a petition in my favor, 110 supporters in this program. Over the last 7 weeks, I've not slept, eaten very well, shed some tears, as you can see, because this is probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. No one should ever have to go through this. This is high school sports. This is not the NBA. This is not college. This is high school. I do this for the love of the game. It's about the things that we do in this program that hopefully kids will remember. Bowling, annual football game, Coach Hayes' wing party. This is what high school sports is about, and it should be. I'm not going to spend any more time or energy discussing the negative individual because I have more character in this one pinky than that individual and his family has in their whole body. I've received, and I've counted these, 726 texts, emails, calls from all over the state. From coaches, athletic directors, one in particular who is his wife is the head of the WIA, administrators, former school board members, and college coaches. I know the board has been flooded with reference letters pertaining to me, and I appreciate that. I'm not on Facebook. I just heard that it blew up. I have 5 character references from 5 administrators in this district. Ashley Flowers, kids played for me. Amy Callion I worked with. Tori Atkins, who worked with me. Bob LeCaptain, who is an official and my supervisor. Those are the individuals that know what I've done.
Coach,
And I'm going to end with this.
thank you.
I hope you're all listening and you'll look at this from a human perspective and what's best for kids. From your heart, you can honestly say that I'm bad for kids in this district. If you as a district are not going to change this outcome, then have the common courtesy to say to me, Coach Rosinski, you are not good for kids and you are not good for this district. And if you could truly say that, then I'm going to use a term that my late mom said. Shame on you. Thank you.
Right. That's the last request to speak. So we'll move on from open forum to strategic planning. So I think David Johns, I think you would come to the board table. And guests.
Good evening, board, student leaders. Thank you for having us this evening for our strategic planning update on thriving student body. My role will be simple.
Katie Felder, and I'm the Director of Pupil Services.
My role will be simple and quick,
to the board,
and that is to just advance the slides as our 2 guests at the table today field your questions based on the 12-minute video that you were shared.
You might remember in February, we have 2 focus areas that can directly influence sense of belonging.
We're sharing it again.
We're gonna take care of that.
Let's pause for a second.
Yeah. Okay.
If you want to go ahead.
Yeah, we'll get started. In the meantime, we'll get that up, and if you have certain slides that you want to reference, we'll get to them.
So board members, if you have questions or comments on the presentation that was provided, please feel free. Samantha?
I just wanted to say thank you for specifically, I know one of the comments, I don't know if it was to this specific piece of the plan earlier in the academic year, but I really appreciated that the data for middle school and high school was separated out. I really did appreciate that, to be able to see the change in those feelings of belonging from kind of the starting point to that this year's evaluation of that. So I did appreciate that. Thanks.
Others? Oh, sorry, Jay.
I just wanted to say that this was really succinct and answered all my questions on how kids find out about programs and to participate. It was very good, so thank you.
Other questions? Alex?
So unless I missed this when I was going through everything, one thing I didn't see is any specific plan to address acquiring, retaining, supporting, developing current and future coaches and or co-curricular advisors. So I was curious if we have any new ideas, what the thought process is, how to grow and expand, and again, support, develop, and grow as many as we can, because obviously that's arguably half the battle. Is none of these programs work, none of them succeed, none of them sustain if we don't do that. And I'm curious not only from that perspective on its own, but then also maybe some things to think outside the box, knowing that most of these end up coming from teaching positions, how from an HR, a staffing and organizational perspective, we can also positively influence having advisors for these things.
So the question I'd have first is this the right audience for that, or is that more of a thriving workforce question when it comes down to this specific topic? I understand the overlap out there, but as far as that planning, was that part of your mandate?
Is it one of the goals? Okay.
That's the broken one.
I definitely see the alignment and connection to. Currently, that is not part of our goal. Doesn't mean there couldn't be some cross collaboration with thriving workforce to, address that or to develop some sort of connection to.
I guess the question would be, and maybe I'm missing it, is how do you achieve that goal without that being part of it, I guess?
Totally agree, because the staff interest has been lower than in the last, probably say 5 years than it has been prior to that. So how do we get staff members to be interested in doing things? We have limitations on that, I'll say, because there's two ways to be you're gonna be passionate about it, or there's financial implications. So I mean, trying to get people to want to do things is difficult, and that's part of our challenge.
So is there a place at all where we have any currently set up plans, initiatives to overcome some of those issues? I mean, for example, maybe starting to anything that could be related to developing better connections with UWGB students or something, or at the end of the day, any ways, new or old, to potentially solve this problem. Because ultimately, I don't know how we achieve any of these goals without solving that problem. I mean, you kind of just articulated that. So I'd like to know, and I'd like to see that. I mean, that kind of has to be part of this. So I'm just curious how to make that happen. I'd like to know that we are doing it, or are going to, and I'm just curious what that might look like from your guys' perspective at some point.
Yeah, that's an important consideration, and we'll include it in our plan for the second year of this work. I would call the board's attention to a sizable component of the report, which talks about embedded opportunities for students to engage in higher interest activities that don't necessarily fall at the end of a school day, but actually make use of some of the time that's built within the school day. And so while we are always seeking to develop and acquire coaches who love to be with kids for those extracurricular opportunities, we're also paying much more attention to the embedded time and opportunities we can give kids during the day as well.
Yes, Samantha.
There was a slide, I think it was towards the end. It was talking about the barriers and the times of day. I think it's a couple, yep, that one. Can you, I know there was an example discussed about creative solutions to using some flex time and some like rotations during that flex time for students so that they can be active in multiple options. Can you just talk a little more about that one example? I think it was a high school example that you mentioned.
Yes, I probably have. We struggle with a lot of students and a lot of multiple activities or athletics. So there's practices after school or different meetings after school. So it was difficult for many students making meetings after school or before school because they might not have a car or transportation to show up for a 6 a.m. Um, meeting. So what we worked on is that Fridays within the week for advisory is a flex time. So at Preble, we have 4 different activities: student council, Preble Pride. I apologize, I can't remember the other 2, but so we worked it out where each one of them has a Friday. So if you're student council, it's the first Friday of each month. On that Friday, you're going to the auditorium and you're having your meeting at that time frame. Now, when comes to a little busier times, homecoming or spring fling, they might meet more often or have little smaller groups meet. But they'll have a standard meeting every Friday, first Friday of every month, and then Preble Pride will be second Friday, and et cetera, et cetera.
So I might not agree with the magnitude of impact that maybe Alex has as to, how we address some of these goals with some hiring practices and some initiatives in workforce. But as we transition between year 1 and year 2, I do encourage the administration to look for seams between the domains and maybe really assess whether or not the goals as stated that you pre-planned without having a lot of observations and evidence to revisit and make sure that we do have the necessary initiatives in one domain that impact the goals of another domain.
You talk about like some of those timing constraints and some of those, the things you're just talking about. And I think about now that we have this built in across the board, particularly at the high school, flex resource time, whatever you want to call it. I'm just curious if you'd thought about or if there was any interest in or any validity in possibly having that next to lunches because then you could create a larger gap of time. Um, obviously you could have said, well, lunches are going to be shorter now, but still, it basically allows you to more or less double a time opportunity if it can be paired to, like, for example, if it's sandwiched between 2 lunches, then you have 2 different groups of kids in lunches that can then utilize a larger time block. I was just curious if you thought about that, if it doesn't work or anything related to that.
Are you suggesting that then maybe kids would get their lunch, join a group alongside of, and then have that extended time?
What I'm saying simply is that if those times are next to a lunch, obviously they can take their lunch time then, and they can now, what went from a 20 or 30-minute opportunity could theoretically, realistically be now an hour-long opportunity to do these types of things.
Go ahead, yes, Lily.
I just wanted to say that I feel like sometimes kids just like to eat their lunch during lunch, or sometimes during advisory, it's not just the clubs, because I don't know, sometimes clubs meet during flex on other days besides Friday, but also like going to my math classroom. AP calculus is very hard. But going to my math room Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, and not trying to overload the school day. Because some kids also use advisory as like doing the Wordle and sitting and just like kind of taking a break because, well, next year it's 2 classes. I'm used to just one. I love my trimesters. Used to just 1 class and then advisory, but 2, and it's like sometimes these kids use these times as their breaks and not overloading the day with more activities.
Others? Jeanette?
So Lily, do you think that by having this only in flex time and that would decrease participation even more?
I think I can see it as being an opportunity for students who may be busier after school to make it during these flex times, but not having that being the only time that you can meet, leaving more room for other opportunities.
David?
Yeah, I think you captured it exactly. This is not about creating a replacement for something else. It's about exploring every option we have to create more opportunities. And ultimately, the end goal in this is not just a raw number of participation rates, but ultimately that it has an effect on students feeling a sense of belonging at school. And so all the various ways that that can happen and the ways that it can look, we just don't want to miss any chance we have for a student to have that, whether it is embedded during their day or introducing something in an after school or before school experience that's never existed before, that's supported and sponsored by a great coach who's developed, and the kids thrive in.
Other questions, comments? Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on in the agenda to education. Alex, and then we haven't spoken. Do you want the chair?
All right. So now we, with education, are going to be looking at the providers for community-based after-school programs and some of the information they have to share as far as who's providing them and at the different sites.
Thank you. And we'll be joined by Amy Fish.
Good evening. I'm here to talk about the community-based organizations that are going to be providing our after-school program services, which will continue to be the Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA, along with the district operating a couple sites. For next school year, we will have a couple changes. We will be going from 11 sites to 10 sites under this model. So our YMCA partners will be going from 6 sites to 5 sites for the next school year as we look to sustainability within our 21st Century Grant Program. So I ask that the board approve the memo as presented in the amounts as presented and can take any questions.
Inspire.
Just a reminder to the board and to the public that 21 CCLC is at risk of defunding by the Trump administration. And I believe I had shared with you contact information if you feel so compelled to send an email of support to keep this funding going.
Laura?
Ms. Byer, do you know why that funding is being eliminated?
My understanding is that an overall reduction for the Department of Education is part of the plan, and this unfortunately was one of the first ones named.
Jeanette?
Thanks. I'm looking at the Doty Elementary being converted to a parent-paid program. So are there opportunities for students who have difficulty affording that they can get assistance either through the YMCA or a program here at the schools?
Yes, the YMCA offers a sliding scale fee. In addition, they accept Wisconsin shares. So we have facilitated through another community agency to meet with parents who are interested in signing up for Wisconsin shares, kind of just really trying to support our families to get ahead of this before we make this change for next school year.
And as a Doty parent, just another piece of information with that, the on-site coordinator that's been there, she is reached out to parents through the communication portal that we have numerous times to try to be further connecting point to helping everyone understand the transition in the program, any assistance that might be needed as it transitions to a different type of program and so on. So everybody that's connected to it has been doing everything that they can. Mary, I think you had your hand up.
Yes, you answered the question. Jeanette asked one question that I had, and so I'm glad those are answered. The other thing that I have being newer to this funding, with the governance request, are these amounts what the school board currently has? Or, I'm just trying to get a handle on where the funding is, if that's something we currently have in our fund right now, or is it just something that's coming in?
This is anticipated grant from the federal government.
But there are similar values each year. So it's not a new novel program. This is a persistent governance request that we have to approve every year.
In addition, we have been working hard within the last couple of years as we prepare for sustainability and as we understand what is being proposed by the Trump administration, to really look at our programming, to create very high quality programming, but where can we maybe make some adjustments? So this finalized budget is a reduction from last year. And it is in part Fund 80 and in part Fund 10 through the grant.
Any other thoughts or questions from anybody? Yeah, Laura.
So I guess once again, we're talking about providing for children with a questionable, with questionable funding. So let's go there. Let's talk about a little bit what that would look like just in our district. If that funding went away, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you how that would affect our families. You don't have to go far into it, but just to get it on the record.
I can share what happened last summer when funding did go away. And we were told by the federal government that we would not have the 21st Century Program that was announced to us in July. And in my brain, I'm thinking we have 1 month to tell families that they don't have a place for their children to go after school, which could mean the difference between keeping a job and having to quit a job for our families. So you can understand the ripple effects that would have within our economy, within our community. So it's huge to our families.
It's just really, really important that we take the opportunity to say this stuff out loud and not kind of pussyfoot around it, because we're here on behalf of our community, and we might as well be honest about it. So thank you.
I will just share lastly, we have over 600 kids that are enrolled with waiting lists.
All right, if that's it, thank you very much for the update. Next on our agenda, we have an addendum to the 26-2031 charter school contract between Green Bay Area Public School Board of Education and the John Dewey Academy of Learning.
Thank you. If you recall, earlier this school year, we presented to you a renewal of John Dewey's charter contract for the next 5 years. As part of that process, once both the charter board and the school board sign off, the contract then makes its way to the DPI, and they work through their rubric to ensure that what they require in the contract exists in the contract and there's nothing that conflicts. From the last contract to this current contract, DPI changed a provision with respect to admission requirements. A charter school can now have an admission requirement so long as it is not discriminatory, if it is applied objectively and it's applied to everyone. So our contract with JDAL, there has
been a requirement that if a student shows a concern about attendance or a concern about behavior, they have entered into an attendance and behavior contract. We don't do that for all students across the district. We do that if they meet certain criteria in the district. DPI indicated that if we wanted to have that exist for our students at JDAL, then we would be required to have every student enter into that contract. In talking with the principal and her governance council, they want to keep that requirement. So we would be asking for an addendum to the contract to make that requirement apply to all students. We would follow the same process if a student has attendance concerns and is habitually truant. This wouldn't be creating any more students being turned away from JDAL or revoked from their attendance at JDAL.
Questions, thoughts? Samantha?
So essentially, this is just another, I'm assuming it'd be a form in the beginning of school, forms, materials that the families fill out.
Yes, Jenny is already working on how to implement it.
Andrew?
Okay, so we're gonna have everyone have to sign an attendance or behavioral agreement where presumably before it was students for whom there were attendance or behavioral concerns would have to sign it. But don't worry, because we're gonna still work with kids and not really be in a hurry to get them out if there's attendance concerns.
Well, for students who have no attendance or behavior concerns, nothing changes for them. It's just an acknowledgement that this is what the charter requires, and it would not be, the same criteria are going to continue to apply for a revocation, whether everyone signs it or the same individuals have signed the agreement. The DPI wants to make sure that for charter schools, the admission criteria is objective and applies to every single student equally.
Right. But presumably you would have had before, and okay, so fine, we have to have them all have one now, but before it would have been, I would assume you probably would have been put on one of these contracts if something serious had happened with attendance or behavior.
That is the current process.
So now we're gonna make everyone sign everything that could put us in a difficult spot if they had not so severe issues or what?
No, because our rubric is not changing for revocation. So if they're not so serious issues, they're not going to be revoked.
So how serious is the threshold?
For attendance, the individual has to be found to be habitually truant, and the school has to have followed the habitual truancy policy, including the notices, the interventions, the meetings with families, and then attendance it does not improve. For behavior, it has to be an expellable offense.
I have one more, then I'm done. Whether or not it was already in the contract, and maybe I didn't say something last time, I'm a little concerned about appealing the decision to the council having only 3 days notice. I don't think we do a lot of things on 3 days notice. It just seems like something that can be well, you took 5 days, and rules are rules. I guess that seems very short. We have a lot of 5, 10, 15-day things.
That is the language that has been on the contract since we entered into the JDL contract.
Samantha?
And just to clarify, the Charter Governance Board and the administration at JDAL is on board for this. This is what they're approving and sending to us.
When DPI gave us this feedback, the next question that Cindy Olson, the supervisor of the charter school, and I asked of Jenny is, what direction would you like to go? Because we can either remove this from the contract or we can leave it in, but it's going to have to apply to everybody. And the response was we wanted to leave it in and apply to everybody.
Anybody else? Thank you. And with that, I yield. I believe that's all we have for education.
Yeah, thank you. And I will pass the chair to Laura McCoy for operations.
Okay, under operations, we're doing some job description updates. And Mike is going to join us.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to bring forward, as part of the regular course of our business, some proposed updates and in a couple cases, a new proposal. So the first two from the superintendent's office, we showed just some updates, some modernized language for our executive assistant, for the superintendent and the Board of Education, reflective of the changes as a result of the election cycle, the deputy clerk duties. I'll pause if there are any questions or comments on that one. The other one from the superintendent's office is the executive assistant job description update for the executive assistant to the associate superintendent of continuous school improvement. David Johns is here to answer any questions if there's anything about that one. Updates some responsibilities reflective of the modern work that Mandy is doing. Amy's here from the Department of Technology. If you did have any questions about the technology integrator job update, that one hasn't been updated for 7 years. So it was time to look it over and knock some dust off and add some things to reflect the work that they're doing in our current environment and going forward. We provide, as always, a red line version showing what it has been and what is proposed, and then a clean proposed version for the board, along with a recommended motion for adoption later in the month. Under school leadership, you might recall that our Head Start program is being reconfigured slightly to have an assistant director. So that would be a proposed, in addition to the assistant principal or associate principal role, the associate principal will also serve as the Head Start assistant director. So this is what the Head Start program governance council has approved for that role. So yes.
When it comes to the Head Start positions, just all of our Head Start personnel are paid for through federal dollars, right? Okay, thank you. I just wanted to get that on the record too.
Correct. Similar to what Amy was sharing earlier, that annual budgetary constraints certainly have an impact on programmatic decisions and things. Out of the teaching and learning department, you might recall that under Act 20, there was the opportunity for the Department of Public Instruction to earmark funds to support an Act 20 early literacy specific literacy coach. And so they provided school districts that had been selected for receiving those dollars, a job description and expectations for a 2-year grant funded role. The district has been selected and will be positioning that role over at Jackson Elementary. And so that job description is what the Department of Public Instruction has articulated would be their expectations for the role. And so the district is looking for approval to move forward with that. David, anything to add on that one?
I'll just add and echo that, as Mike said, this has been our first opportunity to realize some of the statewide funds that were earmarked for literacy development. And we're pleased to be able to add a coach to our ranks through that.
Laura, what does it mean to be located at Jackson Elementary? Is this not a coach that would provide services across the district?
It's a coach that will be based in one building, providing the core functions that our literacy coaches provide in the buildings where they are assigned. The added value of this coach to the system is additional statewide professional development that they'll be participating in, and then also co-facilitating with our director of literacy for the entire coach team. But they will do their day-to-day work and manage their coaching cycles with the teachers at Jackson Elementary.
So it truly is a localized
Correct.
coach.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
The teaching and learning department also took a look then at its existing district-wide literacy coach job description, as well as the literacy interventionist and what had been called the curriculum resource implementation specialist in the math area. part of it was just a branding so that people understood what that work really is. And so they've deemed it a math coach. And so the descriptions are there articulating what those updated responsibilities look like. Again, it's been just a few years, so it was a regular cycle of updates from their perspective. And finally, in teaching and learning, they have a budget manager role that was originally approved a number of years ago, and now that the role is actually synced and in motion and really running, they've updated it to be reflective of what the individual has turned out. You know, what areas of emphasis matter versus things that maybe they anticipated that were not maybe as heavy hitting or as important, and so they've been able to balance that out more accurately. And then the final description is a newly proposed role. There had been a teacher working out of the multilingual learner department who had been working over the summers with regards to assisting in some of their language proficiency testing. And that teacher is going back to the classroom. The multilingual learner department has looked at how they could still address their unmet needs in regards to testing and some other areas in supporting the proficiency assessment process. And so their proposal in coordinating with David was arranging for a proposal for a paraprofessional role to be titled the Multilingual Learner Language Proficiency Assessment Paraprofessional. And so again, it's pivoting from what used to be an educator position contracted to a paraprofessional role with some additional tweaks, I believe. David, anything to add on that one?
Just to reinforce that originally the person in this role had kind of one foot in the student-facing teaching world and another in the assessment world, and we've been able to position that person fully student-facing now and fulfill the testing coordination with this new position.
Alex?
So I have a couple questions. So just tell me if I'm understanding this correctly. Were they doing they were doing both roles before? Were they doing like their assessment portion during just the summer? Or were they also doing that assessment portion throughout the course of the year as well when they were an educator?
There was a significant amount of it in the summer, but also in the to the purposes of serving our newcomers whenever they arrive, that would happen kind of in real time.
And so with this new paraprofessional role solely dedicated to this, does this increase the capacity and the duration of which they can be testing then versus before with that split role?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let me learn a little bit more about the capacity of the person in this role, possibly contributing to maybe, I guess you're saying like a more robust testing type of.
Sorry. My main concern was ultimately rooted in my final question / comment is the concern that, taking away this being kind of a more appealing job as a fully contracted employee, knowing how hard it typically is to find multilingual professional jobs or applicants. If this is now only deemed as a paraprofessional job, the challenge that might exist in trying to find somebody who's qualified and willing to do this job as only a paraprofessional without those added salary benefits, et cetera. And then especially as it relates to what capacity change, if any, is there in making that change and how those things play.
Jerry?
So curious about this piece. So the staff that was doing this role had entered the classroom role. Are they still doing something to like a similar capacity, or are they just solely like in one subject? Like that's completely different from this multilingual learner role.
We've been working to build more efficiencies into staff members who might have had, maybe one role here, a partial role here, and then a partial role out in multiple buildings to try to actually create positions in buildings that one staff person might have two buildings to support instead of 5 or 6, as had been previously the case. So we were able to rebuild a staffing structure that allowed for our teachers to be in those higher impact, less travel time between buildings roles. What that left behind was this gap in the testing component and the coordination of the testing, which is what we would be filling with this role.
So then the teacher that had left this role, is not doing anything that is multilingual related then?
That teacher's returning to the classroom in a multilingual role. Yep.
Okay, and then the other piece was related to what Alex had mentioned. Was just my concern was just like if we're bringing this down to a paraprofessional position and just bring that down to one position, is there going to actually be capacity to be able to thoroughly do the assessments? Just because that is still high need in our community with multilingual learners.
Important question. I'm going to verify that. I was part of the team's thinking when they were talking about the balancing of what roles people would now have in student facing and then the capacities of this. But I would want to verify the same thing that you brought up, that it wouldn't slow down our testing, stagger our testing, be able to accommodate families whenever they might come into the district, and to be able to provide as thorough of an assessment process as possible.
One last question. With our staffers that are multilingual, do they go through any type of testing to get compensated for like the secondary language or, the second language they bring in to our district?
Some of our positions that have been designated as bilingual in our non-exempt or hourly roles, they have an additional amount applied to their wage scale. There is not any difference in how the educator contracts are set up for our multilingual or bilingual staff members, however.
Anybody else? Okay, I think that's it. Thank you. James?
Thank you, Laura. Now pass the chair to Andrew. Take us through policy and governance.
All right, we have one item under policy and governance related to 522.6.
Good evening. This is probably one of the lengthier policy revisions we've had in a while. And I'm going to read the revision considerations to you so I make sure I don't speak and then everyone understands fully what the purpose of tonight's revisions are. In March of 2026, Governor Evers signed two bills into law, Act 88 and Act 89, designed to protect minor students against adults grooming them for sexual activities. Act 89, and I included the statutory reference, requires school boards to adopt a policy by September 1st, 2026 on appropriate communication between pupils and school employees that satisfies the following elements. So these elements that I'm going to review are the exact elements that are in the law that school boards must incorporate into their school board policies. The policy must apply to district employees and district volunteers. The policy must apply to employee and volunteer communications with 1, pupils enrolled in the applicable school district, 2, pupils attending a school that is not under the control of the applicable school board, and 3, pupils attending a home-based private educational program. The policy must apply whenever an employee or volunteer is acting in the individual's official capacity, and it must apply regardless of whether the communication occurs during school hours or outside of school hours. The policy must address standards for appropriate content of covered communications. The policy must address for appropriate methods of covered communications. And the policy must include a range of consequences for policy violations, the most serious of which shall be termination. Additionally, beginning in the 26-27 school year, each school board, governing body of a private school, and governing board of a charter school must provide training in identifying, preventing, and reporting grooming and professional boundary violations. Schools will be given the discretion to administer their own training, hire an outside agency, or utilize a free program developed by DPI to train employees and staff. And I know that the General Counsel of DPI is working with school lawyers across the state to develop that training for the fall of the 26-27 school year. So the question to you, the governance question is, should the Board of Education adopt the revisions to policy 522.6 to address and incorporate the requirements of Act 89? The administration recommendation is yes, the proposed revisions satisfy the elements of Act 89.
All right, questions? Yes, Mary?
I know you touched base on this a little bit, Melissa, but do we have any type of education for current staff regarding professional boundaries in general? Whether that's internally, like, in like an internal thing or something we had hired outside agency to do?
Every year we provide training with respect to confidentiality, and we provide Title IX training with respect to what is permitted under Title IX and what to look for violations of Title IX. This will be another level of training that we do for staff. I know that Mike has worked with our onboarding as well and incorporating pieces of that into our new employee orientation as staff are onboarded.
Okay, other questions? Sam?
Perhaps it's more in the implementation of this. Is there then a directive that this would be included? I would assume some level of training or something that all of our volunteers would also have to do if this applies to volunteers as well. Yes, all volunteers have to do the same training. So just as everyone does mandatory reporter training, including the volunteers, this will also have to be our volunteers doing this training as well. Just another training for them as well.
Jeanette?
Okay, so there were two bills signed into law, 88, 89, but the changes pertain only to Act 89 because there's nothing necessary for 88?
88 was the act that created grooming as a felony and created it under the criminal code. 89 then implemented that for schools.
Alex?
When we talk about volunteers, is there any separation between like a short-term daily volunteer versus like persistent volunteers we have in the school? And if so, how are we, I don't know, lack of a better term, streamlining the ability to do this? Because a lot of times, sometimes there's a very short turnaround on getting volunteers in certain events on a daily basis. So I'm just curious how that plays too. Or something to consider as we develop the training opportunities to have a different version, maybe that is more practical. That's fine.
Thank you. And yes, we have, there's a fine line between someone's coming in to read a book for one time versus this is from the volunteer center doing weekly reading with students.
So you mentioned the volunteer center. So we get our volunteers vetted through the Brown County Volunteer Center. And no, I see you shaking your head, but are they going to be required, if they're placing volunteers in schools, is this going to pertain to them?
Yeah, this law applies to volunteers, and so we do get a number of volunteers through the volunteer center, but we get a number of volunteers, and I think Amy probably left because Amy works with our volunteers, but we get a number of volunteers through all different sorts of agencies and individuals who come in to volunteer. So it doesn't matter where they come from, this will apply to that volunteer.
So what I hear you saying is, regardless of where that volunteer is referred from, they go through the same training. We provide the training, not the agency that's referring them.
It's our responsibility to make sure it's done. So if the volunteer center does it for us, I don't know. I can't speak to what Amy's arrangement is through the volunteer center.
So right now, I believe our voluntary sign up and getting vetted through the school is what, 2 years, right? And then those expire. every 2 years. It's unclear how this fully looks like and how it's gonna fully unfold. But would it be fair to say that if we do have short-term, temporary volunteers that do come in for maybe like concession, right, things like that, that those individuals that are pulling them in to do voluntary services are the ones that are going to be in charge of collecting some of that information, making sure that it goes through the proper channels?
So I think we're talking about a few different things. So the approval for volunteers for a background check is for 2 years. The training requirements may be more frequent than every 2 years for the training requirements. Yeah, our booster clubs that run concession stands, they operate independently of the school district, and so we don't do background checks on booster club volunteers if you're volunteering through the booster club. Our background checks are on volunteer positions within the school district and within our schools.
Sam?
Just because the policy got equally specific, but also very vague in communication modes. And just being on the parent side of things, I know that there's a host of ways that we hear from the school, whether that's at the teacher level, the building level, the district level. I'm just envisioning already a number of apps. You got Talking Points, you got SportsU, you got the Canvas announcements, you got, Google Classroom, you got the host of things. Is there any conversation on implementation within this to streamline communication methods so that from a parent perspective, I'm not having to potentially check 6 different things for communications coming in related to my student or what my student might be receiving? Because I know that this is ultimately coming back to the communications between students and adults. So there's a few forces at play with respect to that. The ADA accessibility requirements, this law regarding approved methods and timing of communications, as well as our budget cuts. And so Lori is working with Tim on focusing on where can we start streamlining, because all of our schools use different methods of communicating for activities and sports as well. And within schools, sports may use different ways of communicating with students and activities as well. So that, I think that those 3 forces have joined for probably what's good is going to come out of this is that we are able to streamline those apps and streamline those communications.
All right. Anything else? Okay, thank you. That'll conclude policies.
And with that, I think we've come to the end of our agenda. And so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. We are adjourned.
You have been watching the Green Bay Area Public School District's Board of Education meeting. Please visit the school district's website, www.gbaps.org, for more information on the district and future meeting dates. If you cannot fully access the information on this video, please let us know the accessibility issue you are having by calling 920-448-2025 or by email at communications@gbaps.org. We will try to provide the information to you in an alternative format and/or make the necessary improvements to make the information accessible.